Hey guys, it's Gary Vaynerchuk, and you're listening to the Front Row Entrepreneur Podcast with our girl, Jen.
You're listening to the Front Row Entrepreneur Podcast, episode number 16. This episode is brought to you by Social Media Summer Camp, a unique 5-week online program that teaches you how to use all the main social media channels to grow your business with social. To learn more, head on over to campwithjen.com. Our next guest is an Instagram whiz. He helps entrepreneurs use the platform to grow their businesses. He's founder of the Follower to Fan Society and the Instagram Stories Workshop. Welcome to the show, Tyler McCall.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. I'm so glad you're here. I've got so many questions for you about Instagram, and I don't know how you keep up with all the changes because it's like everything is changing at breakneck speed. I mean, all good stuff, but man, how do you keep up with it all?
There is a lot happening. There's a lot going on Instagram. And really the way that I stay up to date on all the changes is, of course, I don't think a lot of people know Instagram has a ton of great resources for business owners on Instagram. So there's an Instagram for Business account that you can follow, and they actually have a whole blog that you can check out. So I follow that religiously. And then also just keeping an eye on all the new features, always being active in the different kind of functions of Instagram to see what's happening, and then testing them out and seeing what works, what doesn't work, and what I can share with my students.
Those are great tips. Now, you've gone all in with Instagram. What is it about that channel that made you say one day, I love this so much that I'm going to make this my business?
Yeah. So there's really two main things about Instagram that I love the most. So the first thing is that when we look at all of the different platforms that are out there, Instagram continues to be pretty much the most engaging platform when we compare it to other platforms that do similar types of things. So typically I'm thinking of Facebook or Pinterest or Twitter as or Snapchat, I guess, if that still exists out there, but as platforms that do something similar to Instagram. And Instagram continues to be the most engaging. I would say the only thing that rivals engagement on Instagram would be a Facebook group. Those can be incredibly engaging as well. Mm-hmm. So that's the first reason I love it. It's so engaging. The second reason I love it is a feature that you really don't find on a lot of platforms, and that is the ability to actually find your ideal customer, client, student, whoever you want to reach, and connect with them directly. And I love that so much about Instagram because I can actually spend time on Instagram, finding my ideal student, connecting with them, having a conversation, introducing my product to them. And that all happens on Instagram itself. And that's hard to do other places, but it's really, really easy to do on Instagram.
You know, we've all heard Gary Vaynerchuk scream about like all the action is in the DMs, mm-hmm. but I can see like you doing like a really compelling story and then, hashtagging it just so, or getting it in front of your ideal customer and then them commenting to you or direct messaging you. And I could see that makes good sense to me. The part that I've never been able to wrap my head around is the whole DM randomly, like just messaging someone. Like what does it look like in real life? Yeah.
So this is a great question because this actually just happened to me twice in the past 24 hours. So and I'm, Gary Vee may teach that, go out and slide into people's DMs and engage with them that way. I'm not a fan of doing that. I would actually never do that because first of all, it's a lot of work for, I think, pretty limited return. And also it's just not kind of my style and how I market. Okay. So my approach is to actively engage with people on Instagram through liking and commenting, engaging with their content. And what that engagement does is it's almost just kind of like you're waving or nodding at someone and just getting their attention. So then they can actually come back to your profile and see what you're all about. And that's why it's really important that you have your profile optimized in such a way that when they come back to your profile, they quickly know who you are, what you do, and how you can help them. And then once they're on your profile, they'll start engaging with your content. And that opens up the door for a couple of things to happen. The first thing is if someone's actively engaging with your content and they're brand new to you and your brand, I think it's totally fine to either send them a DM to thank them for following you and engaging, or just always be in the habit of responding to comments on your post as a way to engage with those people and kind of reward that really good behavior that we want our audiences to take. So that's the first way it can happen. The other way it can happen is if you're using Instagram stories, which if you're not, you need to, like yesterday, because Instagram stories are literally the most important tool within Instagram itself. If you're using Instagram stories, that opens you up to have conversations with people on a regular basis. So I'm on Instagram stories pretty much every day. On an average day, I'll get around 50 to 70 DMs on Instagram as responses to my story or random DMs from other people. And just in the past 24 hours, I had 2 folks who I had engaged with their content I found them through a hashtag. They came back to my profile. They engaged with my content. They followed me. They responded to one of my Instagram stories via a direct message. I was able to have a conversation with them about what they do and how they're using Instagram. And I was able to get them into my free Instagram masterclass, and they signed up for my online membership site. So that all happened over the course of about an hour on Instagram. I only spent about 3 minutes having these conversations, but that's what it led to. It led to that return in my business. So that's why one of my kind of biggest things I teach my students, and I talk about on literally every podcast interview that I do, is that on Instagram, engaging more than you post is what helps you be successful. That's what helps you get ahead. And that engagement outside of your account is what attracts people back to you and your brand. That's what gets them to watch your content, to engage with what you've shared. And that is what opens up the door to have the conversation and potentially connect them with your product or service as a solution to the problem that they may have.
Will emojis count as engagement, or do I have to type out actual words with my fat fingers?
I'm a part of the chicken finger club too over here. Okay. I said my thumbs are like chicken nuggets. So I identify with that, but real meaningful comments, real meaningful responses are going to get you a lot further than just an emoji response to someone.
Okay, fine. Well, let me ask you this. So today it's funny because today I got my notifications were blowing up, and this one woman liked 15 of my posts. Mm-hmm. So she just blew up my notifications. So of course, and I knew she was up to something. So of course I click on her, who is this chick? And it took me by default to her story. Uh-huh. And so my question is, I haven't paid any attention to that, but if somebody does that, if they click on us and we have a fresh story, is that the default or not?
That's a really good question. I had not thought of that myself. Yeah. So if someone is showing up in your notifications and they have a fresh story on their account, if you click on their profile photo, it's going to take you to their story. If you click on their name, it will take you to their profile. So Instagram has really made, Instagram stories are kind of the preferred content mechanism on Instagram nowadays. And I think that's one of the things they're doing is they're leading you directly to the story. So yeah, that's something I hadn't actually noticed myself.
You know what? That's what it was. Because again, back to my chicken nugget fingers, I would have clicked her profile picture because it's bigger as opposed to her name in the little feed, so it took me to her story. So, okay. So my next question is that okay to do what she did?
Yes.
Is that a recommended strategy?
It is. Yeah. So that engagement with people is what you have to do to get someone's attention on Instagram. And this really goes back to having a mindset of marketing your business in such a way that you're taking ownership of how you're marketing. You're taking ownership of your message, and you are taking responsibility for who you're connecting with, how you're connecting with them, and how you're spreading the message of your business and your brand story. And a lot of times what I see people doing on Instagram, or really any social platform, but on Instagram, they do this and it doesn't work well, is they just create content really passively and then share that content on Instagram itself and then just expect or hope or wish that people would find them. And that's not the way to market your business. And on Instagram, especially, that's not going to get you very far because hashtags are only going to get you so much engagement. People sharing about your account is only going to lead so many people back to you. Instead, as a content creator, as a business owner, as a brand on Instagram, you can take ownership of that engagement, get out there, have conversations, like people's content, watch their stories, give them comments on their post, respond to their Instagram stories through a direct message, that's what opens up the opportunity for conversation and for growth in your business. So, when I think about how I'm marketing my business, Instagram and Facebook are really the only things I do, and some email marketing. And when I'm on Instagram, I'm only posting a few times a week in my feed. The rest of my time is going to having conversations with people, because that's what is moving the needle for me in my business.
I love that you use that language of taking ownership and responsibility. I've really never heard anybody use that language with regard to marketing at all, actually. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's a really fresh way to look at it. It's like, yes, take ownership and responsibility and put some heart into it. And it's not so much about the hacks as it is just like being genuinely good with your content.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's intimidating for a lot of people, because people don't know really where to start with stories. Like, how much is the mix of personal and business? And like, I know I'm afraid of being boring. So it's like, well, if I don't have anything, most of my days are quite boring, mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, I'm going to yoga again. Here's my coffee again here, but I see other people, what they're doing with it. But so let me just pause and ask you, like, what would be step one for someone to sort of step into stories?
Okay. Such a good question. So this is step one for Instagram stories and for just Instagram in general. And this is getting crystal clear on who you're trying to attract on Instagram as a platform. So you have to have complete clarity around who this person is, where they are in their life. All those details, all the demographic information is helpful, because that's how we can actually find them through engagement. All that kind of psychographic information about how they think, how they feel, what they value. That's important as we develop our brand voice and we craft our content. And we have to get really clear about what their problem is and what solution we're providing them. So that's kind of step one for what we're doing on Instagram. That's what I walk my students through. And I think, I don't know if you see this, Jen, but a lot of people will kind of go into marketing with just like this fire hose, like trying to blast out their product or service all over whoever will listen.
Yep.
And it's not the right people. It's not the right offer. It's not the right positioning. So we just waste our time, and then we get burnout on entrepreneurship or running a business. So we give up. Right. And so instead, if we get that clarity at the very beginning, it just makes Instagram so much easier, because we know who we're creating content for. So when it comes to Instagram stories, I'm always thinking of this person that I'm creating content for. What does she want to see from me? What is she interested in? What does she care about? And how can I break down more walls between she and I, so she can get closer to my business. She can get closer to what I do. She can better understand my approach to what I do in this online marketing world. And she can figure out whether or not it resonates with her. So that's really the first step as you're creating Insta stories, is that clarity around who you're speaking to. Because the two big questions that I always encourage my students to ask themselves as they are thinking about Instagram stories in particular is, number one, what do I want my audience to get out of this Instagram story? How is this going to benefit them? Are they going to laugh? Are they going to be inspired? Are they going to learn something they can take away for themselves and their business? And then the other thing is, what do I want them to do with this Instagram story? What do I want them to do after it? Like, do I want them to go to my Instagram feed? Do I want them to download an opt-in? Do I want them to buy something out of my online shop? Do I want them to come visit my brick and mortar store? What is the next step for them? So if you're always asking yourself those two questions and you're thinking about that specific person, then Instagram stories becomes a lot easier, because you can have that clarity around the content that you are creating. Because here's the thing about Instagram is it's actually not about you at all. It's not about you, your business, or your brand. It's about your followers. So when you shift your approach and you shift your thinking to say, okay, this is about the people who are following me, this is about the people who are allowing me to speak into their lives, then the content creation becomes that much easier, because it's not about you trying to force something, or about you being uncomfortable, or you trying to try something new or weird or crazy. It's about speaking to those people day in and day out. And that's the approach that I take that makes Instagram stories a lot less stressful for me and a lot more fun as I'm creating that content.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I've noticed that you do in your stories is you take the time to, over your video sections of your story, is that you almost create your own like SRT files or closed captions. So that, is that for people who don't have their sound on?
Yes, it's really for two reasons. It started out as an accessibility concern. So we had folks joining our membership community who were deaf or hard of hearing. And I wanted to ensure that all of our content was as accessible as possible. And then it really grew into this thing where all these people were saying, thank you for doing that, because I'm watching, I'm like, I put my baby to bed, I'm laying with them and I'm watching Insta stories and I can't have the sound on, or I'm trying to sneak Instagram stories while I'm watching my husband's favorite TV show on the couch and I want to read what someone's saying. And, we know on Facebook, 80% of users are watching video without sound on, and captions have kind of become like required second nature on Facebook. Right. We don't have hard stats about that on Instagram yet, but I think once we get them, it's going to be up there similar to what's happening on Facebook. So yeah, I caption every single thing. It takes more time. It takes more effort, but it makes my retention on my Instagram story viewership a lot higher because people don't swipe away immediately if they don't want to have the sound on, because they can just quickly read what I'm saying in the video.
Yeah, that really just makes so much sense. So, what do you see when you look through, when you click away from stories or you see like big no-nos? Like, what are the typical big no-nos that you see? I guess in the feed and in stories.
Okay. Yeah. So the first big no-no is lack of consistency. This is in the feed and in stories themselves. So in the feed, this will look like someone who doesn't have a consistent visual identity, doesn't have a consistent brand voice, who is just really confused in the content that they're creating. And that confuses your followers and that confuses us as content consumers, because really what drives success on Instagram is that consistency, consistently showing up with consistent content and a consistent brand voice, engaging consistently, because our followers grow to expect that type of engagement and that type of content, and they'll stick around for that. But if we ever break that consistency, then they'll leave us when we don't have that content there anymore. So that's a big mistake I see people make. The same is true on Instagram stories. So if you say you're going to do a series of Instagram stories, you need to do it. If you say you're going to take us along throughout your day or take us to an event, you need to do it. So how that kind of looks on Instagram stories, where people tend to mess up, is they aren't opening their Instagram story with any kind of context, and then they're not closing it out at the end. So they're bringing us in like halfway through an experience and we have no context for what's happening. And the way I always think about this is, if you've ever been watching a movie with someone, Jen, or you're watching it by yourself and they come in like 30 minutes into the movie and they start asking you like, wait, who is she? What's he doing? Why is that nun on a bicycle? And you're like, I do not want to answer all these questions for you. Like, go figure it out yourself. That's what we do to our followers. Like when we start our Instagram story and we're like, all of a sudden, like on a boat in the ocean, and they're like, wait, when did you live in Chicago? When did you get to the ocean? What boat are you? Like, they're so confused. So they just won't watch, or they'll swipe away. And then on the flip side, it's when we have a story going. So maybe it's, we're on this boat on the ocean. And then we just like post something cute, like, okay, I'm getting ready to dive in. And then we never post anything else for the rest of the day. And our followers are like, okay, are you gone? Did you swim back? Like, what happened to you? I'm never going to see you again. Right. So we always have to close our Instagram stories out as well. So that's a huge mistake I see people making. And really the easiest way to fix this is just by pre-planning what we're going to do on Instagram stories. And this doesn't have to be like scripted out. It doesn't have to be some huge big thing. And it's not something that you have to do all the time. But as you start doing Instagram stories, as you start building this Instagram stories muscle as a part of your marketing strategy, having that really clear understanding of, okay, how am I going to introduce this topic? What am I doing in this story? Am I telling a story? Am I giving value? Am I taking them as a part of an experience? And then how am I going to wrap it up at the end? How am I going to close this puppy out so they know it is over? And then how can I lead them to something next? Like, what is the next step for them? So that really makes Instagram stories 1,000 times more impactful. And that way too, and I think a great way to position this as you're thinking about it is not, oh my goodness, that's so much more work. Instead, think about, oh my goodness, I'm saving so much time because I'm not going to create Instagram stories that aren't effective for my business and what I'm doing.
Yeah. And also like, sometimes things like it takes someone like what you just said about you need to open your story and close your story. It's so obvious. And yet I never thought of it in those terms until you just said it. But also it's like, it's the whole story part of it is that a story starts with once upon a time and it ends with the end. So or they lived happily ever after or whatever. So it's the story part of the story. So I love that. Now, you said to be consistent that one thing that helps with consistency is planning things out. Speaking of that, what do you think about planners, third-party apps? Do you use them? Do you recommend them? Do you not?
So it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish on Instagram and kind of what your schedule looks like, what your time looks like, all of those things. So I am a big fan of Iconosquare. That's the tool that I use in my business. It's what I teach my students. I'm really fortunate that I've been able to partner with them for the past year or so to kind of share more about Iconosquare with folks online. And I love it because it integrates analytics and insights with the planning tools. And there's a lot of really great insights that are available. So that's the tool that I use. But listen, there's a lot of options out there, from Plan to Planoly to Unum to Later to Hootsuite. There's so many options. And it really comes down to whether or not you want more of a kind of insight and analytical focused tool. Something like Iconosquare or even like Later kind of gives you some more of the data about your content so you can figure out what's performing well and help you shape your content strategy. Or if you want more of a visual planner, that's where something like Plan or Planoly comes into play. If you want to visually plan your content, I do always caution my students about relying on a visual planner because Instagram's changed a lot. It's changed a lot just in the past really 6 to 12 months. And a year ago, I think there was real value in having a very visually curated feed. But now with Instagram stories, a lot of what we're seeing on the platform is that people aren't actually creating and consuming as much content within the feed as they used to. Instead, they're really relying on Instagram stories for their content consumption. So that means that a lot of people get caught in these habits of obsessing over the visuals, obsessing over the perfect graphic, the perfect photo, and then also using that as an excuse for not posting. And then they get caught up in the habit of trying to plan it out perfect and have the grid with the design and all of that. And I think a lot of that, Jen, is just a waste of time. And I think folks' time could be invested much more thoughtfully and engaging outside of their account to grow their following with the right people and using Instagram stories to connect more with their current followers more consistently and without having to do all of that fancy, organizing and planning and design work that a lot of people get caught up in.
Yeah, I have noticed that as a person who is not an Instagram expert, and I have noticed that just my own preference when I look at somebody's entire feed from their profile, that it's kind of like it looks so stale with the whole this is I'm going to mix a black and white photo with the hot color and then a black and white photo. And it's so super planned and perfect that it's almost not off-putting, but it's definitely not like what I'm gravitating towards. And then on the flip side, some of my favorite Instagrammers, I've noticed, Caitlin Bacher is it Bacher or Bacher?
I think it's,
because I always see her
Bacher.
name. Bacher.
Yeah,
thank you. Oh my gosh. Sorry, Caitlin. But I've noticed that I love her Instagram, and I've noticed that like the other day she had this picture that was, it was so random. It was like her purse on the floor of her car. And of course you had to click in it because it was like, it just made you curious. And the best marketing does that, right? So it made me curious and I clicked in, but she really tends to write these like blog posts inside her feed. And I want to know, is that the expectation? Like, because that is very intimidating to me. I'd really never have that much to say. So maybe I should, but can you have a successful feed without having a really long blog post to go with it?
Yes. Definitely. You definitely can. Again, this really comes back to who you're exactly speaking to on Instagram and what you want to accomplish with your content. So I love that Caitlin writes those long, lengthy captions. I am a long caption writer as well. And for me, it's because Instagram is really my main thing. Like I don't run a blog. I don't have a YouTube channel. I don't do any of those things. I use Instagram. So when I have an idea that I want to communicate, I do that through an Instagram post or through an Instagram story. And it works really well. And my audience has come to expect that for me. So that's why I do it. But there are plenty of folks out there who are creating content with short interesting captions, with really short kind of quippy captions, with emoji captions. There's really no right or wrong way to do it. It all goes back to who you're speaking to and what you want to accomplish with your feed and with your content. And I will say, if you are in the space of trying to either lead thought online, trying to educate or teach people, then you need to have some content strategy on Instagram in particular that allows you to communicate some of those core messages and core values for you and your business and what you want to communicate to your potential students or clients. Because those folks, especially as kind of your business grows or their business grows, Instagram is still this new platform for a lot of folks, especially in kind of the coaching and course creator space, where there's a lot of untapped potential for folks in that space because they're just now getting to Instagram. So people are looking to those thought leaders on Instagram to better understand what they're thinking and how they're leading. And a long post or an Instagram story where they talk about something like that can work really, really well for that type of content.
So for the people who have not yet come to stories, it's not too late?
It is not too late. I think now is really the perfect time. But if you wait much longer, here's the thing, like you can show up on stories whenever the heck you want. It can be a year or two from now. If you're listening to this, like get on Instagram stories. It's probably changed. It's probably like, we're probably augmented reality at that point, but
right. They're holograms.
Yeah, exactly. But for now, I would say go ahead and get started. Get started as soon as you can. And don't wait for it to be perfect. Don't wait to have a perfect content plan. Don't wait to have a strategy for kind of how you're going to do it or how you're going to use it. Just start showing up. Just start showing up consistently on stories. Take people through your day. Take people into your office. Take people behind the scenes of your business. Showcase your process. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can be awkward and uncomfortable on camera. And what I always tell my students when they push back and they're like, well, I don't look that great, or I want this to look perfect. Or what I hear a lot is, I don't have my hair and makeup done. I always say, stick a filter on it or stick something over your face, put a black and white filter on it and just go with it. Your followers will not care. And if they hate what you're doing, they're going to unfollow you. And all right, fine. Bye. See you later. But if they care about you and what you're doing, they're going to stick around, and you just have to get started. And another reason I love stories is they're really the best place to start trying out video strategy in your business if you're not using video, because they just last 24 hours and they're so simple and easy to create. So it is not too late, but don't wait much longer, or you could kind of get lost in the shuffle. Okay.
Well, I'm totally inspired. Like, I can't wait to go do a story. I should be storying right now. All right. So what, no Instagram, no podcast about Instagram would be complete if I didn't ask you about, what do you think I'm going to say?
Hashtags.
Yes. Hashtag. So we got to talk about them. And I don't even know where to begin. I always get so many questions myself about hashtags. I guess the first question is like, how many should we use? Do we put them in the first comments?
Okay. Great question. So I think the first thing to know is that hashtags have really changed on Instagram. Really in the past 6 to 12 months. Like I said, the platform's changed a lot in that period of time. So what we're seeing now with hashtags is that they're not necessarily leading to as many new people finding your content as they did before. So a year or a year and a half ago, hashtags were really all the rage, because that is how you were found most of the time on Instagram. Because when people were mindlessly scrolling and looking for content, they were typically doing that through a hashtag or the explore page. But since Instagram's changed, Instagram stories exist now, users aren't doing that as much as they used to. So that means hashtags kind of serve a different function now. So as you are deciding what hashtags to use, know that you can use up to 30, but most of my students nowadays are using between 15 and 30 hashtags on their post. And what we really talk a lot about when it comes to hashtag strategy is they need to be very specific. So instead of using very broad hashtags that have a ton of content in them, where your content is going to get lost in the shuffle very quickly, use hashtags that are more specific to your audience and your product and the type of content you're creating. So where you put them doesn't really matter as much. You can put them in the first comment or you can put them in the caption. It doesn't really influence how your content is found. But something I am a big fan of is, which I don't know if we were going to discuss this, but having a business account for an Instagram profile is really important because it gives you so many insights that you need to plan your content. And one of those insights it gives you is letting you better understand where your impressions are coming from and how many of those impressions are coming from hashtags themselves. So that's a stat that I encourage my students to keep track of to help them better understand their hashtags and if they need to change hashtags or try out new hashtags or retire some hashtags. If you keep track of those impressions by hashtag, it helps you better understand your content. And,
Okay, wait a minute, Tyler. Sorry, I got to stop you. Back up. Because I'm like, what did he just say? I never go into my insights. So tell me again, we can see how many impressions based on which hashtags
so
we
you
use?
Can't see, you can't tell based on which exact hashtags. Instead, it's just a total of impressions from hashtags. So this is, this is at the per post level. So each individual post, if you look at the insights, you'll see a ton of data from reach to impressions to engagement through likes, comments, and saves. But it actually breaks down your impressions based on where people are seeing your content from hashtags, from the home screen where your content showed up for them in their home screen, from the explore page and from other sources, from locations, and then from other sources like third-party apps or third-party viewers. So, and I'll be honest with you, when I look at those nowadays, an average post for me will get, close to 1,000 engagement pieces through likes, comments, and saves. But a lot of my impressions from hashtags can be like 14 impressions to maybe up to like 400. And maybe a year and a half ago, and we didn't really have the insights then, but, sometimes I would say that, half of my engagement or more was coming from hashtags. So the app's just changed. It's just changed so much. So the other side of hashtags, Jen, that is really important that people do not pay attention to is that using hashtags to get found is great. Using hashtags to find your ideal follower is 1,000 times more important and 1,000 times more effective because people are still using hashtags because they don't really know what the heck they do or why they should be using them. But that is really great for you as a business owner, as a content creator, because you can actually go out and find content based on the hashtags that are used and engage with that content. And that's how you attract people back to your account. So that's a lot of what I actually teach my students is, cool, let's pick some hashtags, let's use them, let's keep track of whether or not they're doing anything for you. More importantly, let's figure out how you can go spend time outside of your account in hashtags, in locations, engaging with other accounts so you get attention back on your account and you keep growing that following of the right kind of people.
So assuming that my ideal client is a life coach. So I might search for hashtag life coach life. I don't even know if that's a hashtag, but it should be. Okay. So life coach life. And I find life coaches. And then do people do this manually or is there a way to make a list of the people to follow up with later or is just one by one? Hey.
Yeah. So, typically what I teach my students is just going through on their phone. And this is not hours a day. This is like 10 or 15 minutes a day while you're waiting in carpool or waiting in line at Starbucks, going through that hashtag and just liking content, just liking it. If something really resonates with you, leave a meaningful comment, not emojis, not something automated like cool post, but something meaningful that relates to their content and just build that into your schedule, 5, 10, 15 minutes a day. And that's going to start getting people back to your account and start getting more eyes on your content.
All right. Linktree. So for our listeners who don't know, a Linktree is a tool that allows you to put multiple links on a page and then you have one link to put in your Instagram bio. So Instagram only allows you to have one link. And if you click Linktree, it blows it out into more links. What do you think about that using Linktree?
So I think it's a really neat tool. I think a lot of people are misusing it in a way that is just really overwhelming their community. So if you're going to use something like Linktree, or if you're going to have a custom Instagram landing page on your website, which a lot of folks are doing, and actually if you're tech savvy, if you're a designer, or if you have, a designer or web person on your team, I would recommend you build out an Instagram landing page on your website instead of using Linktree. But either way, make sure that you're only giving folks 2 or 3 options. A lot of folks are doing Linktree, or they have their landing page and you come to it and there's like 7 or 8 or 9 things to click on. And it's just overwhelming. People aren't going to do it. There's too many things to figure out. So 2 or 3 options is the best thing to do. But also know that you can change out that link in your bio as much as you like. So I actually don't use any kind of landing page tool. I just change out the link in my bio whenever I want to send people to a specific location, when I'm running a specific campaign or trying to point them to a product or content I'm creating. I just change that out, and always make sure that you have a call to action in your bio. That's really, really important, so people know what they should do with that link and what they are going to get out of clicking that link.
But so Tyler, your follower to fansociety.com people, if you follower to Fan Society, your membership community, isn't that something you're always going to want people to know about? So if you put a link that is your a podcast you were just on or whatever, aren't you worried that some new people are going to miss follower to Fan Society?
So it really depends I think that depends for folks kind of how they're launching or delivering their products or services. So Follower to Fan Society is actually, it's closed at this moment. So like if you try and join right now, you can't get in. So we actually don't do evergreen registration. We do open and closed doors for our community. So if someone follows me on Instagram, they will hear about it eventually. But actually a lot of our members now are coming through our automated funnel that we have running on the back end of our business. So that's how we've had that set up. And it's worked really well for what we're doing. And yeah, that's how we've structured it for now.
Okay. I forgot to ask you about hashtags for stories. Is it the same?
Yeah. Okay. So adding hashtags or even locations to your stories, that's a great way to get added views on what you're doing. What I'm not seeing, and I know a lot of people are saying to do it, and I think it's something that you do, but I would have tempered expectations about how that's going to help you grow your following. Just because if someone discovers your story through a hashtag or a location, there's kind of 2 things working against you. The first thing is that they're typically only seeing a bit or piece of that story. Like Instagram isn't going to deliver your entire story tagged with that location to people. They're only going to see maybe 1 or 2 pieces of the story. The other thing is for them to come back to your profile, they have to tap on your profile name, which is very tiny in the upper left-hand corner. And yeah, as we've already established, the chicken nugget thumbs make it a little bit difficult. So I don't think that's necessarily leading to a lot of follower growth. It will lead to more views on your content, and it could potentially lead to more people kind of discovering you, but it's not going to help you grow your following as much as those engagement strategies of engaging with people outside of your account will help you grow your following.
Awesome. Tyler, this has been so not just like informative, but really inspiring. I'm so excited and encouraged. And I know that my listeners would say the same if they could join us in this conversation. So listeners, if you want to learn more from Tyler, you can find him on Instagram at instagram.com/Tyler J. McCall. And that's 2 C's and 2 L's. And I am going to be waiting by the front door, so to speak, of Follower to Fan Society to open up. That's his membership community, where he helps businesses learn how to use Instagram to grow their business. And as you can hear from the way that Tyler talks about it, he's going to show us how to do it in the right way, not the cheesy way. So it's followertofansociety.com. Tyler, did I miss anything?
That's it. You got everything.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to go look at your stories and learn from you some more over on Instagram. And I just really appreciate you being here.
Of course, Jen. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
This episode of the Front Row Entrepreneur Podcast was brought to you by Social Media Summer Camp with Jen. And that is a unique 5-week online program that teaches you everything you need to know to be successful with social media in your business. For more information, go to campwithjen.com. All the things that we talked about today, the transcripts, the show notes, all the cool tools that Tyler mentioned will be on the show notes page at jenlehner.com/16. jenlehner.com/16.